When you look at social elements, knitting involves string, weaving involves string or some other material. But when we talk about social networks, there's another really important element, and the important element that you can see here is a person. So the person is a little bit like the basic element in knitting. We have a person, and this human figure is going to be our basic element as I walk through an explanation of how some of these structural dynamics play themselves out. Although it's possible, it is quite rare that a human being is ever fully disconnected from other people. So all of us are in some kind of a different, or some kind of social structure. We have some sort of relationship to the people around us. And if you look at this image, you'll see that I've drawn some of these individual elements, these people. I've showed connections between them. And you can think of these, the sketch that I've made here on the slide, as 3 different kinds of social elements. So you can see in the one to the left, everybody knows that one person. So there's one person that they're all connected to, and that person knows them. But you can see that the 3 people around the bottom of that, they don't necessarily know each other. They just know that one person in the middle. If you look at the upper right set of figures, the first person knows the second knows the third, but the first person does not know that third person. They are not connected to each other except through that middle one. If that middle person suddenly leaves, those 2 people won't have any means of connecting with each other. And then the bottom is just a very, very simple one, which is 2 people that have some sort of mutual connection with each other. They, of course, each know each other. And if it's a connection of friendship, then we can see that the friendship goes both ways. Now, if we quiz people about who their friends are, what can awkwardly happen is that some people might say that one person's my friend, but they may not say the same in reverse. And so even in friendship networks, that arrow that I've got drawn there that goes both ways could actually be an arrow that only goes in one direction. So these are social fragments. These are parts of kind of basic parts of the networks that we're all part of, though none of them are quite as simple as this. In social network studies, we use dots and lines to represent people and relationships. The dots are often called nodes, and the lines are often called edges. So you won't typically see large network diagrams that have the little people I drew. We simplify those people down to really basic forms like dots or circles or little squares or some other geometric shape. The diagram, when you have 2 nodes and you draw something between them, that line's called an edge, and the edge indicates some kind of relationship between the 2 nodes. So they have a relationship, and we can say any number of things and say what that means, but it shows some kind of connection between those 2 nodes. This is, of course, extremely simplified. None of our relationships, none of our connections are this simple in any way. It's a very, very overly simplified way of taking the complex phenomena of human relationships and putting it into some understandable form. I think that's always important to keep in mind. Whatever network diagrams we generate, however we do our analysis, however sophisticated our analysis is, it is always a significant simplification of the actual reality of these connections and ties. But it's worth doing because it is useful, and it can help us through that simplification sometimes see things we can't in the cloud of other details that surrounds our interactions. This is a very famous diagram. This was written before computers were used. It's almost 100 years old, 1930s. And it's a famous social network diagram that at the time was called a sociogram. Jacob Moreno drew it by hand, and he generated this diagram by watching children interact on a playground. And what he did is he sat there, and at recesses and lunch hours, presumably he had permission to do so, although in the 1930s, one never knows. But Jacob Moreno was a researcher, and he watched to see who was friends with who played with whom on the playground, where were the interactions. And this is a 4th grade class, and it would be really interesting if we were all together with each other and we're having a conversation for me to ask you, what do you think this represents? What does this diagram represent? Who are the triangles and who are the circles? Well, let me say this. The triangles, if we said that the triangles and the circles represent the girls and the boys, you could make some general assumptions about the social dynamics of that neighborhood. What could we surmise? Well, you can see from the diagram that there are very few connections between the boys and the girls in the 4th grade playground. You can see actually only one brave connection between a circle and a triangle, between a boy and a girl in the playground. we have no idea what that represents. It could have been the boy's younger sister checking up on him. We don't know, but somebody crossed the Great Divide. The interesting thing is, if you looked at the playground as a casual passerby, you can't see these ties. The phenomena only becomes visible when somebody like Jacob Moreno sits there and looks at those ties and takes the invisible relational connection and starts to draw the connections on this kind of abstracted, simplified form. But when he's done that, it yields us something interesting. We have new information about what's there, and it would allow us to do some analysis on that.